Hey everyone, today we're starting a new recap series featuring the DCUniverse streaming network original series Swamp Thing, based on the long-running comic book series. This is the third live-action series from the streaming network, and I'm sure fans have been looking forward to it ever since it was announced last fall. Now, I've never read the comic, and my only exposure to Swamp Thing was probably the 80s movie that I may have seen when I was a kid. I couldn't tell you anything about it, but I vaguely remember seeing it at some point. So with that being said, there's probably going to be a lot of Easter eggs throughout the show that I'm not familiar with, so just bear with me. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Like and subscribe for daily content. Swamp Thing begins with some people out in a boat in the swamp late at night. They're on a mission and soon reach their destination. They toss some boxes over into the water and then realize that the boat won't start again. It shakes and then suddenly they're being pulled around in the water. One of the men falls overboard and tries to swim back to the boat, but he's pulled under by something. We see some vines start to dart down into the water, and one of the men tosses a stick of dynamite into the water, and this angers whatever's in the swamp, and the vines race across the boat and come up through it, impaling one of the men while the other jumps out of the boat and swims to shore. He sees something that we don't, and it fades out, and we see the titles start to play. 2 days later, we see a classroom full of children and a little girl coughing up blood at her desk. She staggers from the chair and then hits the floor as the teacher runs for her. Somewhere in the Congo, we meet Abby Arcane, played by Crystal Reed, who you may know from her work on Teen Wolf and Gotham. Now, I've always liked her, and I was glad she was cast in this. She finds out that there's trouble back in the States, and after looking at a file, she decides to return home for help. As Abby and her friend Holland, who you may recognize from Westworld, drive back into town, we see that she's having some flashbacks to something traumatic that happened to her. It looks like she saw someone jump off a bridge. Abby enters the CDC's setup to visit the young girl we saw fall out in the classroom. She finds what looks like a small plant lying beside the girl on the bed. Outside the room, Abby has a run-in with a man in the hospital who tells her this isn't your usual CDC case, and then he's run off by security before Abby can be introduced to him. She meets up with the local cop who she knows, and they go inside the house of the little girl. The cop tells her that the girl's father is a local fisherman and that he hasn't been seen since all this happened with the little girl. As they explore the house, we see swamp vines along the wall and a mysterious sound coming from one of the rooms. They find the man from the hospital in one of the bedrooms trying to collect a sample. He tells them to turn around, and we see that the owner of the house is in his bathroom, vines growing out of his body. Outside the house, the man introduces himself as Alec Holland and tells Abby that he's been hired by someone to look into this place. He tells her that he thinks his research may help her out with finding a cure for whatever's going on. He wants to take her out to his lab, which is apparently out in the swamp, and she agrees and they head out in his boat. Alec tells Abby that for the past 7 months he's been studying mutagens in the swamp water and that he's very close to discovering a new strain. He shows her a sample of the swamp water and how it makes this moss grow rapidly. He wants to test some of the little girl's blood to see if she's infected with this mutagen. At a town meeting, Alec goes to his employer, who we found out has actually let him go 2 weeks ago, and tells him that about his findings and how he believes this epidemic has something to do with the mutagens he's been working on. The man dismisses Alec, though, and I'm sure it's not the last we'll see of him. During the autopsy of the man, Alec and Abby are looking at some of the samples of what they found when we see the vines start to come up out of the man. This seems to be reanimating his body, and he sits up as Abby notices what's going on. She and Alec try to get away, but the vine grabs Abby by the leg and drags her across the floor. Alec pulls Abby back as the little girl from before staggers into the room and screams. This startles whatever is inside the man, and Abby runs to grab the little girl who's fainted again. She picks her up and runs while Alec sets the creature on fire. Abby struggles to bring the little girl back to life after she's coated and manages to do so just in time. After everything settles down, Abby takes Alec to a bar out in the swamp where a friend of hers is. She tells Abby that she's heard rumors of someone paying people to take boats out into the swamp at night. A woman enters the bar, someone who knows Abby. It's obvious they have a troubled past. She's the mother of the girl we saw Abby have the flashback of that looked like she was jumping off the bridge. She tells Abby that as soon as this epidemic has been cured, she wants her gone from town. Alec and Abby head back out into the swamp to check out a cove, and they find the remains of the boat we saw at the beginning of the episode. Alec climbs up into the boat and finds one of the boxes, and he tells Abby they need to get it back to his lab to find out what's inside. Back at his lab, Abby tells Alec that she's done some research on him. She knows he's a disgraced scientist who tried to fake his own data findings to get more funding. He tells her it's all true, that it got out of control, but that he feels like he's finally onto a big discovery here in the swamp. Abby tells him about her best friend Shauna and how close they were. She tells him that the 2 nights before they graduated high school, she killed her. Alec just leaves it at that, whereas I'm screaming at the TV for more information. They're interrupted by the results of their test, and Alec tells Abby that he's going to go back out into the swamp to find the other boxes and retrieve them before more people get sick. He retrieves a few of the boxes, and then he comes upon someone else in the swamp. He's blinded by their spotlight, and when he asks who the other man is, he's shot in the chest several times. He tries to sink down into the boat, but when the other man aims a crossbow into the boat, he blows it up with something, and Alec is thrown out into the water. Abby sees all of this happen from a distance, and she runs to the window. We see the mysterious man boat off as Alec pulls himself through the swamp. The vines are moving towards him, and they start to take over his body. Is it healing him or hurting him? We don't really know. Abby takes a boat out into the swamp looking for Alec, but she only finds the wreckage of his boat, still on fire from the explosions. She calls for Alec, but she gets no response. Suddenly the vines start to climb up into Abby's boat, and it tosses her into the water. She swims for the shore, but she runs into a body. I'm not really sure who it was, maybe Alec, but it was really too quick to tell. She turns around and sees something come up out of the water, and she runs trying to get away. We see this creature drag itself up onto the land, and I'm fairly sure that this is Alec, who's now turned into Swamp Thing. The episode ends there, and I have to say that for a pilot episode, this was really fantastic. I had really little interest in Swamp Thing, but I think this is DC Universe's strongest show yet. It was just the perfect blend of drama and horror, and I was pretty much hooked from the start. Both Titans and Doom Patrol's first episodes didn't grab me as much as this did, and I'm really excited to see where they're going. I highly encourage you to check this one out on DC Universe if you can. It was just really amazing. So I'm going to leave this one here, and I'll see you all back next week for the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody.